Good afternoon. Today, we're going to discuss fiber applications and their associated network impacts. This is work being done by the Fiber Broadband Association's Technology Committee. Our panelists are myself. I am Senior Director, Solutions and Professional Services for OFS, also FBA Technology Committee Chair, and joined by Mike Render, who's Principal at Render Vanderslice and Associates. RVA is a longtime consultant working in the fiber broadband area for the past 20 years or so. And Barry Walton, Solution Architect with Corning Optical Communications. And like myself, Barry is a former board member of Fiber Broadband Association.
Well, thank you, John, for the introduction. And it goes without saying, a lot of things have changed since COVID has hit. And this slide here just highlights some of the things that have happened overnight. And I can reflect back several years ago when I worked for a service provider, when we were talking to the medical community about moving things to the virtual, to the telehealth platform. And there was a lot of pushback. And miraculously overnight, when COVID hit, a lot of those barriers got broke down. So when it hit, people were told to stay home. Offices closed, work moved to home offices, schools, colleges all closed up, and that became the age of remote learning. Doctor appointments became virtual. Zoom surged from a number around 10 million users to 200 million users within a few months. Netflix went from 15 million subscribers during the early months. Bandwidth demand reached extraordinary heights. Internet use in both US and Canada grew by 40 to 50%. Big thing that changed, upstream traffic, which we haven't seen before, grew by 30% in the US in March, according to Nokia. I'll turn the next slide now over to Mike.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you for the introduction, John. Yes, so we did a study early in the pandemic. This was about late March of 2020. And to really capture the impacts on the consumer, we do a consumer study every year for the Fiber Broadband Association. And in the process, we tried to capture some of the early impacts from the pandemic. And following on asking about video conferencing as one of the things we ask about, you can see comparing early 2019 to early 2020, we saw a tremendous impact, a tremendous increase, over double, on video conferencing for business, for healthcare, education, and of course, family communication. We actually, and even though that looks like it may be over a year, it actually, most of that occurred in the month prior to what we'd seen with the pandemic started. We actually expect that some of those numbers went up actually even further in that time frame as healthcare and particularly education, people really started to get into the virtual education idea and so forth. So those are big. No one knows where it's going to land eventually, but many of these things will certainly be changed forever. As Robert Crandall, former VP or former president of American Airlines, said, third to a half of business travel will go away. Meetings will take its place. So this will change the world forever.
Thank you, Mike. And that's just the beginning, because as we've seen over the many decades that we've had internet access, new applications come into the market and require exceeding amounts of bandwidth versus what we have today. And a couple of those are virtual reality and augmented reality that may transform our play, learning, and communications experiences through immersive entertainment of various types, gaming, learning experiences that are much more effective and realistic, communications that are very realistic and virtualized, of course, including not just social interactions, but merging all these together in a way that we can't imagine today. This is some educational experience being a key one as we move towards virtual and augmented reality in many areas of our life, from children playing to children learning and exploring in a virtualized environment where essentially an additional reality is overlaid on the actual scenery and view of the user in order to provide additional information and context that isn't possible with any applications we have today. So, for example, the educational, the young man exploring Rome is seeing the Colosseum as originally built. Families communicating in a very virtual way. I'd love to have that now. My daughter's up in Pennsylvania on her first job, and it'd be great to be virtual in a much deeper way than, let's say, Skype, where we're all together in a three-dimensional kind of experience. Working professionals, obviously, collaboration with an overlay of augmented information and detail can be much, much more effective than the tools we have today. Fitness enthusiasts exercising together, that'd be awesome to have during the pandemic where we're sitting at home. We can have a virtual community that's much more realistic. So interacting with the content leading to much better understanding, knowledge recall, and retention. And this is some work from ABI research. But to make that happen, we're going to need gigabit symmetrical types of speeds, types of data rates, not just in the downlink, but also in the uplink, up to 5 gigabits per second. And that is with the ultimate multiple degree of freedom video, free viewpoint, immersive kind of experience, because basically what this application does is record in detail the surrounding environment, upload that, and then the augmented reality is rendered on top of that surrounding reality of the end user, and that's transmitted downstream. And so particularly for augmented reality, the upstream bandwidth has to be as high or even higher than the downlink, according to GSMA. And of course, this kind of cloud processing environment requires high capacity and low latency kind of broadband network. And the cloud processing is required in order to utilize low cost consumer kind of product like glasses and so forth, and not having a massive processing power, let's say in each home, but having that in the cloud with AI to provide this augmented and virtual reality experience. And turn it over to Barry to what impact that'll have for the network.
All right, thanks, John. So John's talked about the bandwidth, and everybody asks, what's it going to be used for, and so on. So as you can see on the kind of the chart here, you can see we're starting off with what call low bandwidth applications, and you got obviously you've got different TV streaming, self-driving diagnosis for vehicles, cloud gaming, and so on. But as you look at how things will evolve when you get into looking at HD virtual reality, UHD, VR, things are really starting to chew up that bandwidth. So that really ties in terms of what we would see in terms of where things are going. We're just at the cusp of it right now with a lot of the applications that we're using today. But you will see as time goes on, and especially again coming out of COVID, there's more and more things being thought of now. And it'll be interesting to see where virtual healthcare goes in time as well in terms of what it's going to drive and so on. So let's talk a little specifically in terms of what kind of usage with the various applications we'll use. So everybody knows about digital video. So 4K, 25 megabits, 8K, 100 megabits, all one way for the most part. Then we start talking about the upstream where we're basically into symmetrical services, cloud gaming, a big thing today and going to get bigger tomorrow. Again, starting off 1515, 3535, 100 megabits to 100 megabits. Video conferencing, a lot today is running on 1.8 megabit symmetrical. And I must say, I'm on a network today with 1.5, and it is challenged to basically use the service and have a good quality video. Moving forward into immersive, where you're looking at basically 20 megabits symmetrical. And with all these video applications, latency is impacted. So it's not like picking up a telephone and you may hear some noise and so on and you get by it. But latency on a video application or a game application, it means things stop and things are stalled. So other applications as well, as you look at things in terms of the Internet of Things, everybody these days seems to be fixated on installing the digital doorbells. So they have a symmetrical requirement of 2 megabits. Home fitness. How many TV advertisements have you seen of late that more of the interactive home fitness where you've got your trainer on a screen with you, basically training you remotely. And again, symmetrical services, 10 meg each way. Digital assistants, Alexa, digital appliances, one way, 26 megabits. And it's quite interesting. My wife has me shopping for appliances in the last couple of weeks, and it's amazing the amount of products that are out there that are digitally connected. Security cameras, 2 megabits per camera. And again, if I can reference my own home, I've got 5 cameras at my home currently. So again, a lot of these things in terms of the interactive piece, again, the home fitness, latency is definitely something that would cause that application not to work overly as it should, and as well with security cameras as well. So John touched a little bit on virtual reality and what's coming, augmented reality. And so again, some of the speeds, low resolution, 360-degree visibility, 25 megabits symmetrical. High definition resolution, now we're moving up to 100 megabits. And then we got the retinal 360, and now we're talking 600 megabits symmetrical. Then we got the augmented reality. And again, very similar patterns, 100 megabits each way. 360-degree low resolution video, you're looking at again 250, and again on the retinal, you're looking at 600 megabits symmetrical on both sides. So some really, I guess, bandwidth required applications, and again, really lays to in terms of the networks that are going to be required in the future to support these future applications as they become developed and passed on and rolled out to the various mediums. Telemedicine, which I touched on a little bit earlier, again, looking at 10 meg symmetrical each way. And then you got the unknown, which is advanced robotics. And goodness knows where that is all going to go at some point here. Very hard to determine in terms of what that's going to bring in terms of the landscape of everything. Turn things now over to John.
Yep, so as we aggregate all that together, we have, within the technology committee, started to project what does that mean in terms of bandwidth growth. And I first have to say that I have 2 megabits per second, 3 megabits per second at best upstream. That really isn't enough. Honestly, some of my colleagues who have much clearer images, they're consuming more like 5 to 8 upstream. So we took those numbers that we just showed and put them into a model for a family of 4 and projected an adoption rate of those various applications, increasing definition, increasing reality, virtual and augmented, and projected the bandwidth demand that we might see over the next 10 years. So, and note, this doesn't include robotics. That's really difficult to project what that'll require at this point, but a robot with many cameras recording its reality, so to speak, and uploading that to the cloud and being controlled by AI could be a whole new dimension of bandwidth growth that's not included here. And we are assuming H.266 compression for these applications. And certainly compression may change over time, but even with H.266, we're growing from a peak bandwidth demand for a household of 4 of about 85 down now, 48 up today. And like Barry, Mike and I are all in the same boat. We've got low single digits, and we have to ration our use of the internet, as Mike will discuss later. Would love to have 48 and be fully functional. But that, with these applications, we see growing to the 2 gigabit symmetrical range by 2030, so that the bandwidth upstream will be approximately equal to what we see downstream. And just think back what kind of data rates we had 10 years ago, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we had 0.05 megabit per second dial-up. So this is not as crazy as it looks. We've grown at these rates before, and fiber infrastructure can enable this. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mike to explain that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things we've done in terms of how do we meet this growing need for bandwidth is looking at the capacity of different systems. And a year ago, we set out to do this very scientifically and not just focus on one specification like download speed, which many people talk about, and really look at the whole picture. So what we did is we took scientific data from our own study and also from FCC studies of average upload speeds, download speeds for fiber, cable, wireless cell. And then we really looked at those, and we looked at satisfaction. We looked at overall net promoter score, those who are really promoters of a technology versus detractors. We put all that together, and then we normalized the scores so we could look at them together, and seen on the right side. And you can see the rating on the curve. Fiber is clearly the best, a 98% rating, cable 65, wireless and DSL tied at 38, and then satellite leading, bringing up the tail at 1%. So it really does make a difference what technology you use as far as getting this bandwidth need. On the next slide, I think we talk about, we actually show the speed changes from our consumer studies over the past several years. And you can see the blue line representing fiber to the home versus cable modem and wireless and DSL. You know, we've heard a lot about new technologies to get copper speeds up, bonded pair, and different technologies to try to increase that. Even going to those, or even bringing fiber deeper, hasn't changed the speed dramatically. You can see the purple line for DSL. Wireless is finally picking up a little bit as we're starting to get into, you know, advanced 4G and early 5G, but still far below the other technologies. If you look at the upload speed on the right, it shows the most dramatic difference, and fiber is just really pulling away from the others. And as we're talking, upload is just going to get more and more important all the time with all these new technologies. I'm even talking with a master plan community that's looking at an early robotic application, you know, a simple robot in a playground to be able to interface with children, so, and grandparents. So, you know, these things are coming. It's going to be a big difference. Next slide. On here, we can actually see the impacts that we're actually seeing from the pandemic. We divided in our study this year the speeds of people and the upload speed and download speed into 5 equal groups from highest to lowest. So the top group had 261 megabits down on the green side, 47 up. The bottom layer, 4 megabits down average and 1 up. So some people had even less than that, obviously. We looked at those different groups and what's the impact. By the way, as John suggested, we're probably in the bottom part of group 4. And we certainly know people in the bottom part of group 5, which are, you know, really crying for broadband in this time of trying to do business and trying to educate their children and everything else. Really, really sad for some people. But you can see on the bottom the impacts. We asked people, you know, do you have to do much in-home rationing? In other words, telling other people to get off the internet because I've got a video conference for work, or I've got an important education conference to be involved with children. You know, in group 5, the lowest bandwidth group, 50% are saying they have to do that, up significantly from the other groups. And the same with on-time line waiting. You know, we asked people what percent of their time was spent waiting for things to load, and people gave an estimation. And of course, estimation, but when you put a large group of people together, you tend to get a fairly accurate representation. We converted those to hours, and we saw an amazing 11 hours for the lowest group of waiting for things to load. And you know, we don't think about this many times when we're staring at our screen as the gear is turning or waiting for something, but those hours add up. You know, you multiply that for a whole year, and it's just incredible how much lost productivity that there is from insufficient bandwidth to the home. John, I think I'm going to turn it over to you. I think next slide.
Yes, so thank you for joining our panel today. And please contact the Fiber Broadband Association if you'd like to join FBA. Mike, Barry, and I are on the technology committee, and that's a great way to participate. If you're interested in technology, we have multiple other committees within FBA. The networking is fantastic to learn more about the industry, how to get started in fiber to the home, how to monetize the fiber to the home investment that you have, looking and comparing the different technologies, the advocacy of the Fiber Broadband Association. All that is available to you. So please contact us at the membership information here. And thank you very much for your attention today. And we'll be taking questions in the chat. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day, and look forward to the Q&A.